من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Inshallah, tonight we will finish this lines of poetry by Imam Sa'di rahimahullah. It talks about the characteristics of the Salihin, the righteous people, those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised in His book and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that they will be the people of Jannah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described in the Quran the Jannah and the Na'im and the delight in it, and also the people of Jannah, how did they enter the Jannah by their deeds, so what there were qualifications and their attributes, and this is something that was made very clear for the human being to choose and to work on oneself to achieve these qualities. And anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to do or to acquire, it's in the capacity of every human being. And it's not over the capacity. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that created us, and He knows best what we can and what we cannot do. He's the one that ordained for us or made it obligatory for us to do certain things and haram for us to do certain things. So when someone says that he cannot or things of that nature, this is not acceptable. Unless it's a physical action and a person is not able to do it, you would find in the deen the means of ease. Like if a person is not able to pray standing, then he is to pray sitting. This is not something that we decided, no, this is in the deen of Islam. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the believers to do something physically, then those who are not capable to do that are excused by the statement also of matters of the wahy, the text from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or from the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Qualities like truthfulness, the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of these things which is deeds done by the heart that would definitely affect the person in his physical actions, this is something that is a must for everyone. So the last point, or more than one point that he talks about, he says, عزفوا القلوب عن الشواغل كلها قد فرغوها من سوى الرحمن حركاتهم وهمومهم وعزومهم لله لا للخلق والشيطان. Which means they emptied their hearts from الشواغل, from the things that makes the hearts busy. They empty it totally من سوى الرحمن, except from Al-Rahman subhanahu wa ta'ala. They made their hearts busy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of Allah, the fear of Allah, the hope for the rewards of Allah, because the same act is present in the hearts of other human beings no matter what. There is love, there is fear, there is hope. That's what in the hearts of the human being. They love, they fear, they hope. They're stressed about something because of the fear of danger, fear of poverty, concerns many people, the fear of death, the fear of loss in the family or anything, right? And the hope for wealth, the hope for good life, the hope for health, right? And they have many things that they love that makes them sometimes miserable, makes them sometimes happy, right? And other things. So they do these things no matter what. The righteous ones, they take these things out of their hearts, right? And they put in their hearts only what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the other things become secondary. So their love and their fear and their hope is all dependent on the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fear of Allah, and the hope for the rewards of Allah. So if they love someone, or they love something, if it is not pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they choose not to love it. They only love what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, and they hate what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates, and so on. حركاتهم وهمومهم, their moves and their concerns and their azm, their determination, right? It's all to Allah, lillah. The thing that moves them is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the pleasure of Allah. They don't move except for the sake of Allah. They don't do anything except for the sake of Allah. And if you think of anything in this life, there's no exception. A person can make everything in this life for the sake of Allah. Even ones moments of joy, like he relaxes, for example, or he sleeps, or he plays, or whatever, right? Enjoying oneself, enjoying the weather. All of these things has to have the right intention to be done only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all to fulfill the purpose of our creation, and that is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, following the way the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of these things to Allah, for the sake of Allah, لا للخلق وللشيطان. It is not for the creation of Allah, it's not for their sake, and it's not for shaitan. It's not for the sake of the human beings. That can take the person away from maybe haram, right? But still they can do something permissible if they do things for other human beings, but they waste their life if it's not done with the right intention, if it's not done for the sake of Allah. And for the shaitan, definitely this is a sinful act. So when it comes to any move or any concern or any determination that a person has, either it's a permissible one or a non-permissible one. Non-permissible one, that's for shaitan, that's obvious, that's clear. If it's a permissible move or concern or determination, a person has the determination to study something, to graduate from college, to be whatever profession that he wants to be. Right? This is permissible, as long as there's nothing haram in it. It's permissible. But this permissibility or this determination, either it's for the sake of Allah or for one's personal benefit only. He wants just things for his own self and being forgetful about the purpose of one's life. For the believers, they do this for the sake of Allah. How can that be for the sake of Allah? To protect one's religion, to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without depending on others. For example, money is an important thing in life. To help others, to make it easy for oneself to worship Allah, because that profession, for example, will make him have more time to study the deen, or to come to Salatul Jama'ah, or whatever reason there is. So the concern first and foremost is the deen of Allah, is to establish the worship of Allah, and to use the time and the effort for the da'wah for the sake of Allah. Many things can be established. So the point is, everything, every move is for the sake of Allah, otherwise it becomes either a sin or waste of one's life when this life is so precious. In these two lines, as he says in the explanation, this is haqiqatul zuhd. This is the reality of the word zuhd. Zuhd, or they translate it as abstinence from this life. When you look at something as being very cheap, you don't care too much about it. That's the original meaning of a zuhd. Something zahid, something cheap. People, when something is very cheap, they don't care too much about it. And this is what zuhd means with regards to this life that we live in. It's nothing compared to the hereafter. So when the believers get to know what's in Jannah, what's prepared for them in the hereafter, this life that they live in with all of its pain and deficiencies and so on, it's nothing, it's very cheap. So they would give that away for the sake of the hereafter. But it doesn't mean that they would forbid what is halal. No, they would still enjoy the things that people enjoy in this life, but in their hearts, right, they give it its level or its whatever it's worth. And that's why when the definition of zuhd, or the real definition of zuhd, which is one of the most comprehensive definition of that, the definition of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, الزهد ترك ما لا ينفع في الآخرة. الزهد is to leave what won't benefit you in the hereafter. Anything that won't benefit you in the hereafter, leave it. If you can live without it, then leave it. If it's something that you cannot live without it, that means it benefits you in the hereafter. Right? What is the things that would not benefit a person in the hereafter? Again, either it's haram, definitely it doesn't benefit. But leaving the haram, or the things that might lead to the haram, leaving that, that's not zuhd. This is basically the definition of al-wara'. So there's wara' and there's zuhd. Zuhd is abstinence, and wara' is to be careful from what is haram or what leads the person to haram, or the definition of it, ترك ما يخاف ضرره في الآخرة. You leave what you fear it might harm you in the hereafter. So what harms in the hereafter? The sins and what leads to the sins. So you protect yourself from that, that's wara'. So a person, before he do anything, he makes sure that there is no sins involved. Before he eat anything, he knows that this is haram, and so on. The zuhd is something that is to leave what is not benefiting in the hereafter. So that comes in the excessiveness of things. For example, excessive food, excessive clothing, excessive whatever there is, right? Does that thing particularly will benefit the person hereafter or not? The person has to have knowledge, right? Because without knowledge, a person can make it difficult for his own self or follow other than the way the Prophet ﷺ. And for example, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, he was very rich, right? Abu Bakr had wealth, right? And that is not against zuhd, right? And many of the early generations of Islam, they had wealth. So it is not by wealth, how much wealth a person has, right? Because some people think that if you are zahid, if you are someone that have this abstinence and you leave what is not going to benefit you in the hereafter, that means you have to be poor. This is wrong. And this is what more than one person of the early generations of Islam, they said this thing. The zuhd is an act done by the heart only. It's a pure deed done by the heart. So you can have $1 million in your hand, but your heart, right, has zuhd in it. This is to you is very cheap. You would use it only for the sake of Allah, and you would leave what is not benefiting for you in the hereafter. So this is the most comprehensive definition of a zuhd. And to empty one's heart is not enough unless you fill the heart with what is benefiting. Because if it's empty, then it's not a good thing. So to fill it with what is good, with the proper thinking, with the proper understanding of things, with the proper determination. So instead of the filth, loving sins, or loving things that is nonsense, either a person would love basketball players or artists or whatever, things like this, right? Or love what is needed to be loved. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu and the righteous people and the ulama and the people of knowledge, right? And things like this. So filling the heart with what is benefiting to oneself and to think of what can a person do to improve his ibadah, to improve his worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to improve one's life. There's nothing wrong to think this way, but with the purpose of fulfilling the purpose of one's life, to perfect our ibadah, to perfect our deen and so on. So always they're thinking like this. And they're always witnessing the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that happens. Otherwise a person is always concerned and stressed. And the issue of witnessing the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all acts, and this is the real happiness of this life, witnessing the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the person is always pleased. We mentioned this morning the statement of Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah, that the qadr or whatever happens, you have something before it and after. Before it, a tawakkul. Put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You take the means while the heart is content, right? When it relies on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taking the permissible means. Once whatever happens, then after that immediately you have a rida, you're pleased. Because this was in the qadr of Allah. This was written for the person. وَمَا أَصَابَكَ لَمْ يَكُنْ لِيُخْطِئَكَ وَمَا أَخْطَأَكَ لَمْ يَكُنْ يُصِيبُكَ. What missed you was never meant for you to have. And whatever afflicted you was never meant to miss you. So since it happened, that means it has to happen, because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed. We do not know that till it happens. So after it happens, we're pleased that this is the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is how the person always witnessing the qadr of Allah and the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, between putting their trust and taking the means and then witnessing the qadr of Allah. You take the means and you see the qadr of Allah, and so on. So this is with regards to zuhd, that they have this, and they protect themselves from what makes them busy from their purpose of their life. And if we talk about zuhd, we can talk about the zuhd of the Prophet ﷺ, and there are many examples of this. And how was the life of the Prophet ﷺ? When he, ﷺ, the best man ever walked on the face of earth, and he lived a very simple life. He was the happiest man on earth, ﷺ. There is no human being from Adam ﷺ till their judgment was happier on earth than the Prophet ﷺ. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Nashrah laka sadrak." Didn't we? Nashrah meaning, made your breast wide, meaning the happiness, spacious. It's not tight, it's not stressed. So he was ﷺ until the day of judgment the happiest person ever. Then when we look at the physical life of the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't have much ﷺ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for his Prophet the best. Right? So that means, definitely, without no doubt, that the physical means of this life is not the source of happiness whatsoever. It can be the source of happiness or the source of misery. Doesn't mean that we reject it. No, this is not what it means, but it means this is not what would bring happiness or push away misery, or vice versa. It's something that has to be present in the heart, in the hearts of the believers. So the more the person perfects his deeds, the more he will be the happiest person on earth. And as the ulama, they say, since the Prophet ﷺ is the happiest ever, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu hasbuka Allah wa man ittaba'aka min al-mu'minin. Which means, O Prophet of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient for you, is enough for you. And also He subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient for those who follow you among the believers. So the matter is in proportion here. The more the person is a follower of the Prophet ﷺ, the more he would get a share of this happiness of the Prophet ﷺ. If he perfected, he perfects his happiness. He would be the happiest person. If the more he is away from following the Prophet ﷺ, the more that he will be away from having the real happiness in this earth. So it's all about the following of the way of the Prophet ﷺ. There's a big difference between the hearts is seeking the pleasure of this dunya, and the heart is whatever comes, it comes. If it doesn't come, it doesn't matter. And this is what the hearts of the believers or the righteous ones. They don't panic over what they miss of the dunya. They take the means like everybody else. If you see them from a distance, right? If you're looking at the earth from up high, you would find physically, for the most part, for example, between Fajr and Dhuhr, right? They're all doing the same thing. Muslims, disbelievers, everybody, the righteous and unrighteous ones. But the hearts of the righteous is totally different than the hearts of the rest. The hearts of the rest, their hearts is yearning towards these physical things. This is their happiness and their sadness and their concern and so on. The others, they took it as only a mean for the establishment of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's basically, it comes from the heart. And the Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith, تعس عبد الدرهم, تعس عبد الدينار, تعس عبد القطيفة. تعس meaning he has a miserable life, or a dua against it, then he will be the worst miserable person, the one that is a slave of the dinar, the slave of the dollar and the currency basically, the slave of the money, the slave of the dirham, which is a smaller currency, like the slave of the cents and the slave of the dollars, and the slave of al-qatifa, the slave of the cloth, the things of this dunya, of this life that attracts the people. Either the statement of the Prophet ﷺ means that this is how he will be on the face of earth, or a dua against him, because this is not what we're created for. Then he says, ta'isa wa antakas. He's in a miserable situation and he will be always inverted, like upside down. He's totally doing the opposite of what he's supposed to do. وَإِذَا شِكَ فَلَنْ تُقِشْ. And if he is hurt by a pin or a thorn, right, may it not go out from him. Or it means that he would have a severe, or he would feel the pain that this is the end of life. Like the slightest pain, he panics. Like with the slightest pain in his life. What is the sign of this person? That his life is like this, the slave of the money and the slave of this dunya. In أُعْتِيَ رَضِي وَإِلَّمْ يُعْطَ سَخِطْ. Which means if he's given from this dunya, from this world, he's pleased and happy. And if he's not given, he will be sakhit, meaning that he will be in a hateful situation. He won't be satisfied, he won't be pleased. So this is the criteria. So if he's given from the dunya, he's happy. If he's not given, he's sad. The thing that makes him happy and sad is the materialistic things that he gets from this dunya, and this is definitely not what the righteous people are. The righteous people, what make them happy and sad is the deen of Islam. If they miss a salah, this is the worst calamity that can happen to them. If they miss a chance to do something, if they commit sin or whatever, this is the worst thing for them. And the other things that people, their happiness and their sadness is of, they still do it, but in their hearts this is nothing but a mean to reach the goal of life, which is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And definitely to know this is one thing, but to apply it is another thing. That's why the heart is like a sponge. Whatever environment you put it in, it will succeed in. So that means it doesn't happen by wishful thinking. When a person say, I need to be good, I need to be good 100 times. It doesn't work this way. He has to put his heart right in the right environment. And if he has to go to take the means, right, that means after he finished taking the means, he has to immerse his heart in the right environment. The right environment at home, a righteous environment at home, has no sins free, reminders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the home and in the houses of Allah in the masajid. And the friends and the visitations and all the other relationships that a person has, definitely the heart has to be away from the things that distract it and makes it away from understanding the purpose of one's life. So he says at the end, فأفكارهم حائمة حول هذه الأمور. ما هي هذه الأمور? Like he says, the thing that a person always think about, في كل ما يقرب إلى الرحمن, everything that makes a person close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, من تصور علم, thinking about matters of علم, of knowledge, وتدبر القرآن, pondering over the Quran, ذكر الله, the remembrance of Allah, بحضور قلب, when the heart is present, وتفكر في عبادة وإحسان, thinking about عبادة and a good deed, خوفا من زلة وعصيان, the fear of slipping by sins, أو تأمل لصفات الرحمن, or reflecting upon one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to glorify Allah away from all deficiencies, أو تفكر في القبر وأحواله, to think of the graves and what's happening to the people in the graves, أو يوم القيامة, on the day of judgment, and the agonies in the day of judgment, أو في الجنة ونعيمها, thinking about the Jannah and the delights in it, and in the hellfire and the torment in it. So أفكارهم, their thinking, حائمة حول هذه الأمور, always around these matters, متنزهة عن دنيات الأمور, free itself from the low things that people think about, that does not bring anything but misery and wasting time, and making the heart is always diverted, not benefiting to the one in this life or in the hereafter. Right? So this is one thing. The last line that he mentions, نعم الرفيق لطالب السبل التي تفضي الخيرات والإحسان. These people are the best rafiq, the best companion for the one that is seeking a subl or subul, which means the paths, the one that is seeking the right path, the path to the Jannah. These are the people that have these qualities, are the ones to be the companions that will help you in the path for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, التي تفضي إلى الخيرات والإحسان, that would lead the person to the khayrat, to the good things, and the khayrat is the plural of khayr or good, and ihsan also is the good things. Whoever follow them, whoever follow their ways, and what we heard in these qualities and so on. So as we heard, most of these things that are mentioned are deeds done by the heart, actions done by the heart, which is the foundation to the speech of the tongue, and the actions done by the different parts of the body. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those righteous ones, those who have these qualities. And inshallah ta'ala, next time we'll start something else in matters of manners and so on, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us life. If you have any questions or any concerns, please go ahead.